I'm going to start my presentation with a question, because one of you is going to get grilled. Who trades to Taiwan or is involved in grain trades to Taiwan? 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 Okay. Yeah, Taiwan, yeah. Yeah? Okay, great. I'll have a question for you in a minute. Okay, right. Grain trades. Actually, I was very pleased in Dr. Lemke's presentation, our numbers seem to tally, because normally you put 2 or 3 specialists in any field, and I think in freight probably more than many other fields, and you end up with 5 or 6 different opinions. So it's good to see that we're actually looking at more or less the same numbers. Right. Starting, this is what we're going to look at today. A brief look at the grain S&Ds, and I don't want to spend too much time on that because you'll realize very quickly that you know much more about grains than I do, and that would be very embarrassing. So I'll just skip over those as fast as possible, but if you do have questions on those, then fine. And also, as Annie mentioned, I like things to be interactive, so if you have any questions at any stage, just raise your hand or throw a question out there. Then I'm going to look at a few. Actually, some of the numbers here were in Dr. Lemke's presentation. The size of the grain trade flows in the world trade. It's quite interesting to highlight them because they were actually there, but I just want to emphasize them and show you what the size is and why, in a sense, they're very small, but they're also quite critical and they can lead to bull runs and changes in the market. And a few freight sensitivity examples. This is very much down to earth. How much it costs to get cargo from A to B, and what is your exposure? Talking about risk, managing risk. What is the sensitivity to different factors that affect freight? Because we talk in shipping, we talk about time charter, which is typically how much we pay a ship to hire it every day. But that's not the only thing that affects freight. A number of other things affect freight, and actually you can impact on that. You can actually negotiate your contracts in certain ways to help us, the ship owners or disponent owners, to reduce the overall cost of freight. And so I'm very pleased about that, especially because Dennis mentioned yesterday that when the price of rice rises, governments fall. And so hopefully, if you can help me on this one, our governments will stay stable, the capitalist order will be be fine, and everyone will be happy. And then finally, a few very down-to-earth recommendations on logistics. This, again, more or less the same numbers, but focusing on bulk freight only, bulk trade. We expect it to stay relatively unchanged, around 315 million tons. There is an inflection over the next year. Exactly how much? Around 4% is probably about right, but broadly stable around those levels if you look at the overall picture. North America, NAM is not Vietnam, of course. North America exports increased by around 6%, so the US is doing well there. And South America exports, I think we all know what the issues are there. At least you know them better than I do, particularly in Argentina. This is a graph which actually is not reproduced in your handout, I think. It's on a net change basis, and it shows the seasonality quite well between South America and North America of what we tend to look at in freight and what drives freight. And you see here, and this is the 2009 projections, so we're sitting at the end of May. You can see that June is still, from a grain perspective, a bearish scenario, and then July, and then it's quite interesting to see that the South America season quietens down in August, and gradually the North America season picks up. So actually, from a grain perspective, we have quite a bearish outlook in terms of the next few months. This is all in thousands of metric tons, of course. South America, I think most of this you probably know. One interesting factor that we haven't talked about too much on the wheat side, it was mentioned before, but the doubling of Australian wheat exports is not going to be enough. If you're in the grain trade and you see that Australia is doing so much better in terms of production, I think the numbers were mentioned, wheat production that went from 11 million tons to 20 or something like that. The doubling of exports is not going to be enough to help give support to the freight markets, and I'll show you why when you see the breakdown of how much grain represents in world trade flows. Very interesting to see also the South America season that started a few months back actually was one of the first signals of a rebound of the freight market, and we've seen a very unusual very unusual pattern with Panamax vessels that doesn't happen very often, ballasting from the Pacific all the way into the Atlantic to pick up cargoes and then carry them out to the east. Why that's important is because we look at the same numbers in terms of new buildings, order books, how much we're scrapping, how much of that order book is really going to come online. But what impacts demand for vessels and for freight at the end of the day is ton-mile demand. And what I mean by that is that you have the number of tons or the millions of tons of cargoes that are shipped around the world, but if you ship, to give you an example, maize or corn from North China to Korea, that's a 15-day voyage, loading, discharging included, your impact on the freight market is not very big. But if that trade flow replaces another flow from, say, Canada or from South America, but particularly Canada or West Coast USA or the Gulf, into the Far East, which is about a 70-day voyage, from Canada is about 55, 60 days, then your ton-mile demand actually increases substantially. So what we've seen over the last few months is, particularly in terms of the ballasters going directly from the depressed Pacific into the Atlantic, is that ton-mile impact on the usage of the fleet has been quite big, and that's why one of the reasons why we started to see a rebound on the smaller sizes. That is just for your reference, the curve of the South America season. And one of the things that we look for, and that you know again better than I do, in terms of freight, is when does the commodity hit the ports in South America? How much is planted? What are the yields like? That is all important. But also the timing, and of course the politics and the political problems that we've had in Argentina recently have impacted that greatly. But what is the timing of all that commodity starting to hit the ports, because that then affects demand for ships, but also congestion, and we'll come back to congestion in a minute. Right, this is just to emphasize the point around the share of grains in the overall, and again this is the bulk carrier flow. I'm not talking about containers, and please don't ask me questions about containers because I know nothing about them. Right, this is the breakdown in 2008. It's our own estimation, so we may be off on some of the things. 2008 of the world bulk carrier flow. You have here iron ore and steel, which represents close to 30%. Coal, another 30%. Grains, 14%. And then other, that's quite interesting also, because if you look at cement, if you're reading your newspaper in the morning and you see that Spain has stopped building houses because you have a housing crash, well, lo and behold, that'll affect cement flows. Same thing for Turkey. I think Turkey, they're building quite a lot there, or they were building a lot there. And so those, what we call the minor bulks, that we tend not to focus on too much, actually can have a relatively large impact, a compounding impact on whatever else is going on. And so the source of our woes over the last few months were economic. And so, you know, if the economic situation, oh, there's a copy there, didn't realize. If the economic situation dictates that all commodities contract, then just focusing on the grains, coal and iron ore and steel is not going to tell the full picture. And some of those minor bulks actually can have quite a large effect on bulk. This is, we don't need to go into this in too much detail. What I like about this one is that it's very simple, so you can remember it very easily. These are the major iron ore flows. You probably know them already. If you do, I apologize. But the big ones, of course, big exporter is Brazil, which has one of the highest qualities of iron ore, into China. And we'll come back to that actually, because the reason why we're seeing capes today sail through the 50,000 mark on their index without even pausing to look at it, even though it was on the, apologies, it's not an on the ground thing, but there was this major technical resistance